She has that kind of pit bull, like Sibulkova was a little bit like that to me as well.
Obviously, one of the storylines last week was Alex Eala and the massive crowds that she was bringing to Dubai. I think it was perhaps maybe more notable there because that's not a tournament that is typically packed.
This is 75. It's not like, they had cell phones and everything. It was rough. Then all hell broke loose at the press conference in Forest Hills. That's when I famously said I want to be number one. Little did I know that I would, you just don't realize you're in the middle of a...
She didn't even know she was playing that week. Not at first. A spot opened up only because another player withdrew. The kind of last-minute change that usually slips past most fans. For most players, an entry like that means nothing more than one extra match on the calendar. For Alex Eala, it became the star of something nobody saw coming. She wasn't the top seed in Stuttgart, wasn't a Grand Slam champion with a name that made people stop and stare. She was simply a young player handed one more chance to compete. And yet, within days, an entire tournament could not stop watching her. It started small. A few extra fans wandered over to a practice court. A handful of people stayed a little longer after she finished hitting. Then it kept happening match after match, practice after practice, the same faces returning again and again. Curiosity turned into habit. Habit turned into real excitement. Fans began building their day around her schedule instead of the tournaments, lining up early near the practice courts, watching every rally as if they were already watching a champion, not a young woman still building her career. This wasn't happening because she had just beaten a legend that week. There was no single result driving it. People simply wanted to watch her play, and that alone changed the mood of the entire venue. As the days rolled on, word spread fast. Social media picked it up, and soon the crowds were impossible to miss. Walkways that were usually quiet during early rounds were suddenly packed, and staff found themselves managing scenes that normally only show up much later in a tournament. Something unusual was happening. The only real question was why. Longtime commentators, people who had watched plenty of future champions rise, admitted that the atmosphere around this young Filipina felt different. One broadcaster even joked that winning almost seemed secondary, because the crowd had already fallen for her before the match even started. Other analysts stayed more cautious. Experience still counts in tennis, and so does power. The players she would face had already proven themselves on much bigger stages, and logic said excitement alone couldn't outweigh years of professional experience. But even the cautious voices sounded less certain than usual, because every time Alex walked onto the court, she gave people one more reason to believe something special was unfolding right in front of them. So what were people actually seeing? Part of it came down to her game. Alex plays left-handed, and that alone gives opponents a look they rarely face. Shots arrive from angles most players don't train for, and simple rallies suddenly feel unfamiliar. But it wasn't only that. People kept pointing to her backhand. While many players build their game around a strong forehand, analysts called her backhand one of her most dangerous weapons. Heavy, aggressive, able to push opponents off the baseline before they could settle into rhythm. Add her habit of striking the ball early instead of waiting for mistakes, and a clear picture forms. She wasn't trying to survive points. She was trying to own them. That kind of nerve tends to earn attention fast. Talent can impress a crowd for a few minutes. Character keeps people coming back for the next match. She wasn't only stacking up wins and headlines. She was quietly chipping away at old assumptions about what a player from the Philippines could achieve on tennis's biggest stages, and those old limits were starting to crack. But some of the most memorable moments didn't happen on the court at all. They happened right after. Following one win, Alex sat down for a post-match interview, still catching her breath. She admitted her first thought had gone straight to her parents watching from home. She wanted to call them immediately, she said, but the media obligations came first. It wasn't a rehearsed answer. It was simply honest. And honest moments like that often reveal more about an athlete than any winning shot ever could. Because fans rarely fall for perfection. They fall for the person underneath it. That was becoming clear all through Alex's week in Stuttgart. Fans weren't just cheering wins anymore. They were following a story. Every match added a chapter, and every chapter pulled in more people curious about what came next. Nobody organized any of it. It simply happened on its own. Around the grounds, one question kept resurfacing. What is it about her? Some pointed to her fearless style. Others mentioned how calm she stayed even as the attention kept growing. Many people simply admitted they couldn't explain it. They just knew there was an energy around her matches that was hard to look away from. Sections of the crowd carried flags and cheered after nearly every point, turning a neutral tournament into something closer to a home crowd. Thousands of miles from the Philippines, Alex was receiving the kind of support most players only feel in front of their own fans, something that almost never happens this early in a career. For many Filipinos, this wasn't just another tennis tournament. It felt like possibility. People who had never followed the sport closely were suddenly checking scores throughout the day, families passing updates back and forth, friends staying up late just to catch one more match. The excitement had moved past the court itself. It had become something shared, something national. Through it all, Alex herself stayed remarkably grounded. Her mother reportedly said she wanted to watch another rising player compete, forgetting for a moment that Alex was scheduled to play at the exact same time. When someone gently reminded her, she laughed and said, of course, she wanted to support both. A small, warm family moment, but it revealed something bigger. Even as the outside world turned Alex into one of the tournament's biggest stories, the people closest to her kept treating everything with warmth and ordinary humor. That kind of balance matters more than people realize. Professional tennis asks for far more than clean serves and solid ground strokes. Players carry heavy expectations into every match, and the mental weight of that is often harder to carry than the physical demands. That is why another detail from her interview stood out. Asked which fellow player she leaned on during stressful moments, she spoke about a friend known for bringing laughter into tense situations, someone who could make her smile when tournament pressure became too heavy. It sounded like a simple answer, but underneath it sat a real lesson. Success at the highest level isn't only built on intensity. Sometimes it comes from knowing when to laugh, and when to step back from the pressure entirely. For someone still early in her career, that instinct reflects a maturity many athletes spend years trying to find. Analysts kept circling back to that left-handed game, and to how deliberately she used it, attacking from both wings, never letting opponents settle. That is why experienced observers began describing her differently. Not as an interesting young prospect, but as a genuine threat. Still, the real story here was never one shot or one win. It was what those wins were starting to represent. Each milestone reached further than her own career, expanding what an entire generation of Filipino players could picture for themselves. In one interview, Alex reflected on becoming the first woman from the Philippines to defeat a Grand Slam champion, and the first player from her country in decades to beat a top 10 opponent. Asked what those achievements meant for the nation, she didn't turn the answer back toward herself. She quietly suggested that maybe the country itself should answer that question. A humble response, but one that carried real weight. She also admitted that growing up, she had very few examples from home showing her this path was even possible. Now, whether she had planned for it or not, she was becoming that example for someone else. And that may end up mattering more, over time, than any single result on a scoreboard. By the later rounds, one thing had become impossible to miss. Alex Eala was no longer just another name buried in the draw. She had become the story itself. Not because anyone had crowned her the future of tennis. Not because every question about her career had already been settled. But because something far harder to manufacture had happened. People cared. In modern sport, talent alone doesn't always hold an audience. Every tournament is stacked with gifted players capable of incredible shots, yet very few build a real emotional bond that reaches past the court. Alex appeared to be doing exactly that. Fans weren't only discussing forehands or tactics. They were talking about what her rise meant, a young player carrying the hopes of a country that had waited a long time for a moment like this one. As her popularity grew, some fans wondered online whether future tournaments might adjust scheduling around the interest in her matches. That remained pure speculation, nothing confirmed, but it said plenty about how much attention she had built in such a short stretch of time. Perhaps the most remarkable part of this entire story is how quietly it began. She didn't walk in as the favorite. She earned her place only because someone else had withdrawn. Plenty of athletes get chances like that. Very few turn them into something people remember for years. Alex did exactly that, turning what could have been a routine week into one of the tournament's defining stories. Every performance made it clearer that her success wasn't luck. It was built on preparation, on nerve, and on a willingness to face pressure instead of running from it. Along the way, she kept reminding people that records never belong to just one person. Every barrier she broke reached far beyond her own career. For young players across the Philippines, those achievements quietly expanded what now felt possible. Kids watching from home could finally point to someone who had walked the road they only dreamed about. Every new generation of athletes needs proof before belief can take hold. Alex was becoming that proof, whether she had set out to be or not. Of course, every breakthrough brings its own challenge. Attention brings expectations. Success brings pressure. Every future tournament will now arrive with more cameras, and more people waiting to see what she does next. Breaking through is hard. Staying there can be even harder. The spotlight rarely shrinks. It only grows brighter. That is the road now sitting in front of Alex Eala. The questions surrounding her career have shifted. Not long ago, people wondered if she even belonged on this stage. Now the questions sound different. How high can she climb? How many more barriers can she break? How many young players will pick up a racket simply because they watched her story unfold? Nobody knows those answers yet, and maybe that uncertainty is what makes this chapter worth watching. Sport is always at its best when the ending hasn't been written. What happened in Stuttgart wasn't remarkable simply because of one strong week of tennis. It revealed something larger. A late entry turned into the center of attention. A young player from the Philippines captured the hearts of fans far beyond her own country. Real milestones were reached, and honest, human moments deepen the bond between a young athlete and the people cheering her on. Whether this becomes the defining chapter of Alex Eala's career, or simply the opening pages of something bigger, only time will answer. But one thing already feels certain. She walked into Stuttgart carrying very few expectations. She walked out with the entire tennis world watching her far more closely than before. Sometimes a tournament crowns a champion. Sometimes it introduces the sport's next great story. For everyone who watched that remarkable week unfold, it felt less like watching a rising player, and more like witnessing the opening chapters of a journey whose best moments may still lie ahead. Rankings will rise and fall. New tournaments will come and go. But moments that inspire an entire generation last far longer than any single result. If this week proved anything, it's that Alex Eala's journey has become about more than one player chasing success. It's about what becomes possible when preparation meets opportunity, and when one athlete's breakthrough hands countless others permission to believe they might do the same one day. The next chapter hasn't been written yet, and that's exactly what makes it worth staying for. If Alex's journey has pulled you in the way it's pulled in so many others, stick around. Her biggest moments are still ahead, and we'll be here to bring them to you.